What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So today we are finally back here on the Survivor Scholars YouTube channel, going to be talking about Survivor Season 47, Alyssa and I's first time going into a Survivor season without doing a cast assessment in like the past 10 years. So my name is Rachel.
I'm Alyssa, and we figured this whole experiment of not going in doing a cast assessment, like following all of the press and stuff, would be a not a good way, but a better way to see how a casual fan approaches the season. Just because I feel like after doing cast assessment, tribe reactions, all of these things, I feel like I know these people better than the average person probably knows them, going into the first episode of Survivor. And there are sometimes where I'm like, Jeff, you said this person's name, but I have no idea who this person is. And I think that's a very different reaction experience than if you're like, yes, I know every cast member and also where they grew up and also their occupation and also their 3 favorite animals or whatever question they're asked on that questionnaire.
Yeah, I'm like, now we're just like a regular person again, except it is interesting because you hear these tidbits about the people from like listening to Rob Has a Podcast, haha, but you hear facts about these people that aren't in the show, like their age and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I do wish I knew their age and job before going into the season and some of those questionnaire answers, because I think that gives you a good background behind these people. But now I feel like we're like a regular person watching. We just see what's happening on TV. Maybe someone we really would have liked would have stood out in the preseason questions and videos. But alas, we don't have that at the current moment.
I do think it's interesting though, because you also doing all of that preseason stuff kind of have preconceptions of what someone is going to be like based on their questionnaire or just based on stuff like their age, their job and stuff like that. So I think that not having those preconceptions is interesting, because we saw a couple of unlikely duos form this premiere episode, and I feel like neither of us probably would have predicted that, even if we did see the preseason information.
Yeah, I think it's an overall fun cast. It would have been fun to do a cast assessment, but I think this will be a good experiment this season to see, okay, no cast assessment, not knowing anything going in. How does that shape our talking about this show right now?
I feel like for me, the big thing is I'm still not entirely sure of everybody's names. And so that's going to be fun. But I feel like it's interesting though, because as a watcher of the show, you get the names of everyone who is important. But then that also means that there's around I would say 5 to 8 people who never really came up, whose names I still don't know. And that makes it harder for them to talk about, because it's hard to be like, oh yeah, we didn't see anything from this person or this person, when I'm like, there are definitely people I didn't hear talk. Do I know their names? No, I don't. So.
To me, it reminds me of when I watch Australian Survivor, and sometimes in that show, the edit is just so atrocious. People are purple left and right. And that show, I don't watch any cast stuff pre the show airing. So it's sort of similar. Like, okay, if someone's being purpled, they're probably not important to the overall storyline. And then it's like, okay, I actually don't know who these 3 people are because they're never on the television screen. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens here.
Yeah, but it's also been hard because my natural inclination is also to look up stuff after the episode airs, recaps and other information. But I know I've been trying to stay off of Survivor Reddit, not read recaps and stuff like that, to kind of preserve the illusion of being casual for another week or 2. I probably won't last longer than that.
I'm excited to be back. Alyssa and I, we took some time off in the summer since the end of Survivor season 46. I did some traveling this summer, and then I recently started law school. So that's a little update for me. Very busy, but I am still listening to Rob Has a Podcast.
Yeah, and I finished graduate school and got like a big kid job. So we're making money moves here on Survivor Scholars, which meant that Survivor had to take a little bit of a backseat. I am not even listening to Rob Has a Podcast because I have so much other stuff to do. So good
Yeah,
times.
the scholars are scholaring. So, overall thoughts of this premiere episode. I thought it was a little bit like, eh. I found myself like scrolling Reddit throughout the episode just because, okay, the TV wasn't really capturing my full attention. I felt like it was a lot of people running around in the woods, which isn't necessarily that fun to watch. I feel like we can't really play along at home. I'm like, okay, cool. They're running around in Fiji, which is pretty cool, but it looks like a random forest.
Yeah, I feel like for me, so much of it was focused on this beware advantage, which is like fun the first time, but after you see like the third person like find the beware advantage, they must not have hid them that well to start with. But then also, I'm just like, I don't want to see more footage of the stupid beware advantage.
Yeah. So we'll get into this. I also noticed it's a lot of podcaster, like talk show people they're casting, professional yappers, basically. We've got podcasters, sports commentators, radio host. I think it's Alyssa and I's time to get on the show because they're just casting yappers, and we could do that too.
I was telling my dad about this though, and he said that our niche is already filled. Like they've
Oh.
fulfilled their podcaster quota for the next like 10 seasons. So we just need to wait for like 10 seasons to pass and then they'll hire two podcasters again and it can be the two of us.
Uh, I feel so bamboozled though. I really thought John was going to make it far because Jeff was hyping him up so much. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, this is the Pod Saves America guy. This is the person I recognize from this entire cast. For me, I was like, oh, I recognize Asia. I don't recognize John. But like, Jeff was hyping him up so much. I really thought he would at least make the merge.
Yeah, I wonder if that's because Jeff realizes that like we read into his comments and he's like, "Ooh, I'm going to double bluff you." But I don't know, maybe he also is hyping it up because a lot of people watch Pod Save America and so you got to get any eyes that you can on the premiere. And then maybe some people will still keep watching if they watched for John even though he's voted out. Because I know I, for one, would continue watching just because I want to see what the heck happens with the person who could have gotten voted out instead of John.
It's a really low bar, I think. Jeff says that John is like one of the best Survivor commentators ever. And I'm like, okay, John's quotes and him speaking in confessionals, pretty good. So I'm sort of bummed that he got voted out first here because I would want to see more of him, more of his commentating throughout the season. But I'm like, one episode, Jeff, how can he be the best? That's why I thought he was making it far.
Yeah, Jeff also has some weird takes in general, so I don't trust Jeff Probst's opinion.
So we get to the first Matt chat, and Jeff, he is talking. He's giving us background information about how the show works. It's the community. You're voting each other out, but then you need these people to vote for you at the end of the game. Basically, a rundown of Survivor, how it works for the casual fan. A lot of wasted time for people that know how the show works. I thought Teeny's pants were really cool. I really liked those pants. I want them.
Those pants were wicked. I also liked the description of them as scarecrow-esque. Like that was very. They do look like scarecrow pants, and I do wonder how comfortable they're going to be. Like if they get wet though, because it looks like they were denim. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking jeans might be heavy and like water and stuff like that, but the pants were really cool. I'm like, they look very fall, and like now the weather's getting cooler. I totally wear those to like the pumpkin patch.
Yeah, but aside from Teeny's pants, I liked that Jeff kind of did the rundown of Survivor just because I think, again, as someone who's very engaged in the Survivor community, you can kind of like know, like, oh, this is how it happens. This is what happens every season. But like turning it on for the first time, you might be confused between like what's a reward challenge, what's an immunity challenge, what's even happening right now. So I thought that was a good way to kind of open up the season. I felt like his monologuing about community was felt a little bit forced, just because like he's like, this is the only game that does this, and I'm kind of like, Big Brother basically does the same thing. Sorry, but yeah.
Yeah, we also see like people getting asked questions. Andy, this is the start of Andy throughout this episode where he says that he had only 4 friends in high school, to then John saying, "Oh, that's nice." I'm like, okay, so is 4 a lot or not a lot? Because I could see both sides. I'm like, okay, 4 seems like a lot. And like, how close are these friends? If it's like 4 besties, that's a lot of besties. If it's 4 like casual acquaintances that you know in class, but you never hang out outside of class, maybe not so many. But I'm like, 4? That's sort of a lot of friends.
Yeah, I feel like if someone's like, I only had 1 friend, that's when I feel bad for them. But like 4 friends is a respectable amount of friends. I feel like, there's all those like research articles about how many, like what the average number of friends to have is. And I feel like 4 is like below average, but it's not like far below average.
Oh, that's really interesting. I'd want to know the average number. And it's like I'm saying, yeah, if they're really close, like you would die for them. That's a lot of close friends. I don't know if that many people have 4 people that they would like risk their life for, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I also like John's quote here. He says, "What you would play like or could play like is about to be fact checked about what you will play like." I really liked this quote. And I think it really encompasses like, okay, if we were to be on this show, that's basically what it is. You would be standing on the mat nervous. And I feel like a lot of super fans probably go through this like, okay, I think I'd be really good at the show, XYZ, but then push comes to shove, you're out there, and then things go horribly wrong and you're not actually that good at the game. So it's like, I really liked that quote.
I also thought it was very like speechwriter of him to be like, fact check, fact check. Like that's a very politicsy thing to care about. So, but I do think that like kind of boils down the way that like, again, also kind of why people's preseason like press stuff isn't always accurate, because people are going to say like, oh, I want to play like this or I want to play like that. But when the rubber meets the road, that's not how they actually play. So John supporting our attempt to be casual fans this season, I guess.
Yeah, I really like the quote. I think it probably resonates with a lot of people. I think, and like, yeah, maybe he is one of the best commentators of Survivor in the one quote. I really liked it.
Yeah.
So we get to this first reward challenge. 2 players from each tribe are going to race into the jungle, and then you pick up 2 puzzle pieces until you get all 6 pieces for your tribe. Then 2 members are going to build the puzzle at the end in order to win your tribe supplies, the pot, machete, and the flint. Anything you thought of note for this challenge?
It was kind of just a challenge. It was fine. I thought it was interesting. There was only 1 winner, but I feel like that's also kind of been standard for these challenges. So I kind of like it better when there's 2 winners and then 1 person like has to do something, but I understand why they had to have 2 losers to do the setup they wanted to set up.
Yeah, I feel like new era, 2 losers for this first challenge, and then they got rid of the sweat versus savvy, so that would be the 2 losers. Here, yellow is back last to get all their puzzle pieces, but then Rachel and Annika are on the puzzle, and then they pull through and catch up and win the tribe supplies for the yellow team.
Woohoo! I mean, we always say that the puzzle is the great equalizer, and this is no different, so...
Yeah, 1 win here, but they lost when it counts in the immunity challenge. I feel like personally, I would choose to want to win the immunity challenge over the first tribe supplies. Send someone to do the new sweat versus savvy replacement.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
So the replacement of sweat versus savvy, they're all there. You have to send 1 person onto this secret mission. Jeff tells you nothing about what the mission is. Just 1 person has to go. Asia volunteers to go, and that's like, ooh, okay, as a podcaster, maybe that's not that good to volunteer for. TK also goes after winning their rock, paper, scissors variant. And I feel like I was like, this is brand new. This is the new Sweat First Savvy. Would you want to go? Because for me, I'm like, okay, you're going to miss out on so much socializing time. It's literally day one. You're going to be gone for a little bit. People might suspect that you have some kind of advantage. It could be a target on your back. But on the other hand, this is brand new, so you could get some kind of OP advantage. Something good could be out there. I feel like for me, I probably wouldn't want to go because it's just too risky. Even though it is brand new, it could be really bad, and then you get a target on your back for missing the socializing time.
Yeah, I'm a very risk averse person in general. Like if I saw a beware advantage, I would not be touching that thing. I would not want to lose my vote. So I feel like I definitely would be like, nope, it's not worth it, especially because then you might end up in a situation like Asia was in where you then have disappointed your tribe and also lost out on the socializing time, where like the worst possible outcome does not make up for the possibility of the best possible outcome.
I think for me, yeah, it's like putting your neck out there too early. It's putting a target on your back potentially. It's making you stand out as like, okay, this person's a player potentially. Like they must know Survivor. Like, why would they want to go? What are they thinking? I think it could put a negative target on your back. We'll have to see. Asia seems to be able to go back in with her tribe. TK maybe a little bit more friction with him and Gabe. But I think it just makes you stand out too much. I'd be like, yo, that person's playing hard. They volunteered to go on the mission.
Yeah. I also feel like a part of it is when you volunteer for something like that, you're just painting a target on your back. And I think Asia got lucky because Rome just ended up being a whole like hot mess express. And so do you get lucky if you're able to reintegrate yourself back in the tribe? Because I feel like you might not always get lucky. So
Exactly. So this is the start of people running around in the woods scenes. Here you have to, they're versing each other, so only one of the two can win the tribe supplies. The other goes back empty-handed. You have to hunt around the woods here to find the pictures that match the spots to get the keys in order to go win the tribe supplies. I'm like, okay, they're running around the woods. This is great. The funny part was when they're both like, what the heck? Why is it in the water? This is so unexpected. And then Asia getting lost in the woods, and then her and TK getting to the water around the same time. It would have been really funny if they wrestled for it, but that would have been really bad socially to do on the first day. But it would have been funny.
yeah, it would have been funny. I also was curious, like, how much of this was like editing magic as far as how close we were led to believe they were. Because to me, it seemed like Asia was really like far ahead until she got lost. But we also don't really know how long she was lost for. And to me, I want like a little timer in the bottom corner of like how long have you been lost? Just to see like how close it really was, because they did arrive like together at the last minute, but I don't know how much of that is because of like her getting lost and how much of it is just movie magic.
Yeah, that's true. It would be interesting if she said, "Okay, I got lost for like 10 minutes, I think," or actually, I was really only lost for like 2 minutes. Because if it's 2 minutes, then it's really extra close. Like, no way TK was waiting around the water for that long. You're like in waist deep water. It's not going to be that hard or take that long to find the buoy in there, even though it is underwater. So it was pretty close. They both made it to the buoy around the same time. They should have fought for it.
Yeah, but fighting on the first day, probably not a great idea.
No, it's like she did the right thing. You just have to let him get it. Like maybe you fake try to go for it because maybe she could have grabbed it. But yeah, if you wrestled for it the first day, like some people might, that would be an instant X. I'd be like, that person has got to go. They are wacko.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be really tense and awful. So
So they go back to camp. TK wins the stuff. Asia does not. Teeny recognizes Asia from Rob Has a Podcast. Teeny has also done online reality games and has been seemingly successful, I think. People have talked about them playing in those orgs. So Teeny seems like a very big fan of the show. based off of the internet talking since we didn't watch the cast stuff. But Teeny recognizing Asia, I think, okay, that's like Alyssa or I. Like you're a bit fan of the show if you recognize someone off of Rob Has a Podcast. So
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out because I've thought about this. I'm like, okay, if I'm on one of these shows and I recognize someone from Rob Has a Podcast, like, do you tell them that you know who they are? Because that could put a target on your back because Asia could be like, this is dangerous. Let's try to vote Teeny out because they recognized who I am. They could use that against me. And Teeny could go tell people like Asia's famous on the internet. She knows Rob Sesternino. She talks about Survivor as a side hobby job. Like they could throw you under the bus kind of thing. So it's like, do you tell the person or do you keep it a secret and just like buddy up to Asia and be like, oh, you're really cool. Let's work together.
Well, I think part of it is kind of the idea of like mutually assured destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I tell everyone that you're a famous podcaster on Survivor, that means that I know, which is then painting a target on me too. And so I think what Teeny did here, which is be like, hey, I know who you are, and I want you to know I know, is like a good way because then Teeny kind of has something to like hold over, but also it was done in such a way that doesn't make it seem like, oh, I'm going to blackmail you with this information. It's just like, we're obviously both super fans. Let's do this together. And I feel like it would be hard to do the reverse because you can't be like, we should vote this person out because they recognize my Survivor podcast without being like, I have a Survivor podcast. So
that's true. It's a hard like lose-lose situation. Like in Survivor 42, Zach Wurtenberger recognized Tori from playing in the online reality game. So maybe someone could recognize Teeny, something like that. But like Zach was saying, oh, he wished that he threw Tori under the bus that first vote, saying that she was in org, she's a big fan, let's vote her out because of it. But then, like we're saying, if he did bring that up, it would have been interesting to see how that played out because then people could be like, so you're watching these orgs online to recognize her? Like, I feel like playing in orgs is like a step below being on Rob Has a Podcast. Like, it's more niche to recognize an org player.
Yeah. It definitely also is like a level of super fandom where I feel like even when I was still like before we had this podcast, when I was watching Survivor like regularly and considered myself a fan, like I still had no idea like what an org was. And so I feel like tiers of fandom, you can be a super fan and still have no idea what an org is. So
yeah, I think it depends. I think with like Rob Has a Podcast, maybe you tell the person because it's like big enough. And I feel like casuals maybe have heard of Rob Has a Podcast. I was talking with one of my law school classmates and like they knew who Rob was in his podcast, but I don't think like they're watching religiously like we are kind of thing. So I think maybe RHAP is something more acceptable to recognize someone from. Like for me, I recognized Muna off the mole from playing in orgs. I think that is something you maybe keep to yourself because that's a little bit too niche.
yeah, that definitely would be something niche to keep to yourself.
But it does seem like Teeny knowing who Asia is probably helps her. It seems like Asia, Teeny, Keyshawn, and Soul on the red team could be a foursome. Seems like there was that scene too with Teeny and Genevieve where Teeny's like, okay, let's wait for the fourth spot. Maybe Asia could be that person in there. And so seems like them knowing her is going to be useful because Teeny seems to want to work with Asia, at least for the time being. It's like, who wouldn't want to work with the RHAP podcaster?
Yeah, but I also wonder part of it might just be like you do want to know who you're working with before you jump into bed with them. Because I feel like we kind of saw that play out with Andy and John, where they like had that day one connection, but then their day one connection kind of ended up shooting John in the foot. Where you don't want to like just be allies with someone because they were the first person that you saw or the first person that you talked to. So I think that I like to believe that Teeny would have like been like, hey, let's wait for this person to come back regardless of who it was, just because that's, I feel like, solid gameplay to make sure you know all of the pieces before you start playing the game.
Definitely true. So I think red will be very interesting to see what happens if that foursome becomes a foursome. I think that could be fun because Keyshawn as the doctor, that seems really cool. Soul seems really interesting. So I'm like, oh, I really like this group. I wish they got some more screen time, but maybe hope they don't go to tribal because that'll get them more screen time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think it could be something like, oh, if you recognize someone off the internet, maybe it's a little bit of like familiarity. Like, okay, I know Asia from YouTube or Spotify or wherever you're watching. And then it's like, okay, I maybe know some of her life and background, and that feels a little bit more familiar. So maybe I want to work with that compared to the other, 17 strangers out there you literally know nothing about. They could be lying about their job or their age for all you know, but you're like, okay, I know these facts about Asia from the show that she's talked about, so maybe that's a little bit more familiar.
I feel like that could also be like a parasocial thing, though. Like if you feel like you know someone because you like saw their podcast versus like actually knowing them. Plus, also, I know plenty of people who like have an online presence who lie about stuff in their online presence as like an internet safety thing. Or, like lie about like their age or lie about where they live or lie about any number of things just because you shouldn't be putting all that information on the internet.
So we should be lying about everything.
Yeah. So
yeah, I could also see like as if you're watching RHAP, like you're a fan kind of thing. I think it'd be cool to like play with a fan or work with a fan, similar to like people that recognize Suri on Big Brother. You have that sort of like, oh, this person is like famous, Suri is famous. Asia would say, a lower level than someone like Suri kind of thing, but still like famous in their own regard. It might be sort of like, oh, that's really cool. I'd want to work with, the famouser person here, because then maybe like if you're thinking, and these people are probably on Reddit, if Teeny votes Asia out first here, they're going to get a lot of backlash online. So you'd want to work with the famouser person.
yeah. It's a whole thing. There's so many like layers to it.
It's so interesting. We could talk for an hour about this. So we go to Gabe. Gabe is from Baltimore, so I think that's pretty cool. TK is also from or at least went to college in Maryland, as we saw happen in this episode. So it's
He's from PG County.
Yeah, if we did this cast assessment, we had 2 Marylanders on here. So Gabe and TK, they bond over their Maryland background here. We see Gabe hunting for the different clues, keys to open the boxes, to find the idol. TK sees Gabe messing with the vines, and then they find the key. I wonder here, it's like, should you just fess up? There's no way TK believes, oh, we found the key without ever finding a clue. Like, no way the Survivor producers are that bad at making a game. They probably don't hide the key until someone finds the clue. So either way here, it's just sort of bad for Gabe getting caught. Like, if you fess up now, like you have to work with TK, and Gabe didn't really trust him that much yet. If you don't fess up and you lie, then like they're just going to think you're dumb for lying about it.
Yeah, I feel like Gabe said something like, oh, I think TK believed me. And I was like, oh, honey, he did not. So definitely, I feel like there were a lot of people being kind of stupid about their idol hunting because like you have until tribal council to get the idol without losing your vote. Like you don't even know yet whether or not your team has lost. So don't like put yourself in a potentially uncomfortable situation doing something as soon as possible when you might not even need to do it this soon. Like it just felt like they were going so hard because it was day 1 or day 2, or I think everyone found it on day 1. But in any case, like take a chill pill, cool your jets. Like you don't need to find it all immediately.
Yeah, I agree. Like it seems like Gabe and Rome now sort of have a target on their back for being sketchy, basically. Like everyone's pointing out they're looking, they're doing weird stuff. Gabe and Sue, maybe they're aligned. Gabe wants to work with an older person, so he tells her about the idol. Gabe gets the 1 tribal council idol, but then you can do more tasks to get the 3 tribal council idol. And I'm like, okay, at that point, maybe you just got to go for the 3 because it sort of maybe makes you safe until merge, basically. And then he finds the 3, he does the tasks to get the 3 tribal idol, and then it's another box. Okay, if you do another task, then you could get a real idol that lasts until final 5. Gabe chooses to keep with the 3 tribal idol. But I feel like at this point, you've already low-key effed up some of your social bonds because people think you're sketch already. You might as well continue to be sketch and go for the full-fledged idol.
I think it depends on whether it's 3 tribal councils or 3 tribal councils that you attend. Because if you are someone who is like on a team that does really well, maybe 3 tribal councils is all you're going to need because it'll get you pretty deep into the merge. And then like people aren't going to remember that you were sketch at the beginning by the time you get to that point. So I don't know, because I feel like also the tasks, some of them were like a little bit more difficult than others. Like I feel like the water well, you can always make an excuse to go to the water well. And I think that the way they tried to retrieve the key from the bottom of the water well was kind of dumb, in my opinion. But versus like the braiding of the vines, like those are very different levels of difficulty and levels of like openness, like how exposed you have to be. And so I think if you don't know what the last task is going to be, you might be like, maybe not. So I kind of get it because 3 tribals is still a lot. And if nothing else, you can just use it on that 3rd tribal and like make sure that you get a little further in the game.
Or I was thinking if Gabe doesn't use it, you just lie and say it's a full-fledged idol. And then if other people, like if Rome and Gabe swap stories later, you just lie and say, oh, I make up a task of what you had to do for the final key to get the last box kind of thing. It could be useful to lie about it, but then that could still put a target on your back. I thought Rome's like clues were a lot harder of the things that he had to do, like soaking the wood to get the message. That's hard to hide compared to like hiding the box again. Or like undoing the braids, hiding the wood with the big ass message on it. I was like, where are you going to put that?
But soaking the driftwood versus breaking open the driftwood, I feel like it's a lot easier to soak it than to like break it open, especially like if you're doing it in the middle of the night. The thing about soaking the driftwood is you could just like drag it to the beach with you, soak it in the water, and then like push it out to sea. Like,
and then the tide brings it back, and then they're like, why is there a message on this log?
Well, that would be, I feel like him leaving it in the middle of the forest was also kind of sus because it's going to take time for it to dry out. So
yeah, I think Rome's way of doing it was just sort of whack a little bit, like diving.
It was so suspicious.
Like, I really wish the foursome saw him. Like, what the heck are you doing head first in the well? But like, they didn't see them. I really wish they all walked up on him in the well looking like that. It would have been so funny.
It would have been so funny to see what Rome would say he was doing. Like, oh, I dropped something in the, like, what do you even say?
Yeah, and then you're like literally like only your legs are sticking out. Like it's just, he posted on Reddit like a screenshot of that scene, and it's like a zoomed out shot of like lots of forest, the small well, then you just see his 2 little legs poking out of the well. I wish he got walked in on. It would have been so good. Like they should have just faked it. Like make them walk in on him. But we don't know if Rome got any idols thus far. We didn't like get cut off there. So next week we'll probably see him do some more searching in the woods. Hopefully maybe he'll do some more whack stuff. That's sort of funny. I do really like Rome's lightning t-shirt. He wore it in the immunity challenge. I was like, that's a sick shirt. I want one.
I didn't pay attention to his shirt that he wore in the immunity challenge, but now I might have to go back and look.
Next week, you got to see it. It's so cool. It's like a tank top, but then it's like the red lightning bolt strikes going through it. It's really cool.
Okay, I will look for this shirt the next episode.
Yeah, so we get to the immunity challenge. You are paddling boats to get these heavy chests, and then you have to get your boat and the chests to the puzzle area. Then it's a survivor puzzle. All the boats flipping over, sort of funny. Jeff was having way too much fun though with these people's misery. I'm like, I've had like to be flipped over on a paddleboard. That's so hard to get unflipped over. And I was like, I would just die trying to flip your boat that's now capsized and full of water. I'd be like so annoyed.
I would give up. I also am curious because they run these challenges with the dream team before they like do the actual challenge. I would be so curious how many of like the practice challenge people tipped their boat over, or if like no one else has tipped their boat over before and now two teams did it this one time. I thought about that when both of them tipped over. I was like, is this a common occurrence, or are they just both uniquely bad at this challenge?
Yeah, literally. And like, I'd be so sad. You're like, the water is in our boat. We can't even use the dang boat anymore. It's so heavy. Yeah, I'm like, I'd be so pissed off. I thought it was weird though. Like, Red finished the puzzle so quickly, like 2 shots. One shot, they started it. Second shot, it cut to them. They were finished the puzzle. I thought my computer glitched watching it the first time. And then on the rewatch, it was the same thing. I was like, this editing is so weird.
Yeah, I feel like part of it is just because it was unimportant. Like you
Mhm.
knew that Red was going to win. And so like why even bother showing them putting together the puzzle? So it
Yeah.
was kind of strange editing though, I agree.
You got to leave time for Andy because Yellow starts to fall behind in the puzzle. And then Andy goes and sits down. I was like, okay, is he really overheating? I think he just like was quitting basically. He saw that his team was losing. He wasn't on the puzzle, so he goes and sits down in the shade to sort of have like a temper tantrum over there. And then it gets played off when medical comes, and then he's like, okay, I'm overheating, and then gets help.
Yeah, I wonder if he was maybe having a panic attack because he saw that they were losing and then like panicked because he felt like he was indisputably the one getting voted out. But yeah, it definitely felt off.
Yeah, we see Andy and Jeff talking here when he's getting help. And then Jeff says, you're going to tribal. And then Andy says, they're going to vote me out. Then Jeff says, but you're still in the game. And I was like, I was so confused what was happening because it was just so quick of Andy going to go sit down, Jeff asking if he's okay, them calling medical over, that team loses the challenge. And then Andy's like, no, I'm going home. Jeff's like, no, you're still in the game. The game's not over yet.
Yeah, I wonder if it was like him asking to be medically evacuated. Like that again, that felt very strange because I was like, you don't know that you're going home. Like what is going on here? And then he didn't get voted out. Like spoilers, I guess, but like he didn't get voted out. So this whole insistence of like I'm going home. Like part of me wonders how much of that was like playing head games with his tribe, but I don't know.
And then it gets even more whack because then, okay, Andy gets cleared. He's all good. He was overheating. He's standing on the mat. All the teams are there. And then Andy announces to every castaway, every camera, Jeff, everyone, I'm getting voted out tonight. And then he's telling everyone his plan of, I was thinking my best friend here, John, I wanted to throw him under the bus so that he would get voted out. And then you see the other team's faces like, what the F is happening?
I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I feel like that the Yellow Tribe voting John out first is like going to be the reason that none of them win this season. Just because I feel like the fact that Andy so completely like blew up at this like challenge and then like gave the other tribes so much information and then like he ended up getting his way. Like that's just so wild to me. Like what are the other tribes going to think when they like go into the challenge next episode and John is actually gone? Like are they going to be like, you guys actually listened to Andy? Like yeah, it's a whole thing.
I agree. I feel so bad for John, but now after it's Saturday, like 4 days of this, I'm like, okay, now I want Andy to wreak havoc on everyone on Yellow. Maybe besides Rachel. I like Rachel, but like everyone else, I hope Andy F's them all over.
I also would be okay with him, like, kind of screwing over Rachel, just because, like, not to be like, this is all Rachel's fault, but I feel like his downward spiral was definitely accelerated by her being like, dude, we can't talk about this, and kind of like rejecting him when he was already worried about rejection. But that also, that was like the right move for her game, but I hate that it ended up ruining John's game. So I don't know. I kind of have a whole thing against Olive Yellow now. I didn't think I was that big of a John fan, but like the more I'm talking about it, the more I'm like, what the hell? Why did you keep Andy over John?
Yeah, we're yellow haters now. I'm like, so that scene, Andy couldn't sleep at night. So it's sort of like Ben and Kenzie, but day one. So, okay, for Rachel, 100%, you have to say, no, this is so sketch. Everyone's going to think we're in a tight duo. And like, if you're already seeing some signs that maybe he might not be a good ally, someone to work with, you're like, definitely, heck no, do not bring me out to the beach. People are going to want to vote us out. So it's like, yeah, good for Rachel. Like, you shouldn't kind of do that thing. It makes sense for maybe like Ben and Kenzie because it's at the merge. People might be more willing to like, okay, they're just friends. They're just going out there because Ben's having a hard time. People saw Ben having the issues at night. So they're like, okay, someone's comforting him. Day one doing it, people are going to think it's really sketch, which does feel bad because, like, okay, on the human level, you would want someone to be there for Andy. He's having a rough time, can't sleep, spiraling, overthinking. Like, yeah, as a person, you would want someone to help you. In the game, day one, it makes sense that the people are going to be like, heck no, do not bring me into this. You've got to figure it out on your own. After that conversation, I really thought Andy was going to throw Rachel under the bus and get her voted out because he didn't feel good after their conversation.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the way that people treated Jess last season, because it was like Jess was kind of in a similar situation as Andy, where like she wasn't really sleeping. She was having a really hard time making social connections. But rather than like the story being about how like, oh, Jess is a mess and everyone else is like, it feels like Andy is getting more pity, even though like he and Jess essentially had the same thing. I don't know. Just like that was the immediate parallel that I drew, not to Kenzie and Ben, but to the way that Jess has treated her.
That's really interesting. So, speaking of Andy as well, though, I think this is the best lines thus far. He says, when I'm cracking a coconut, nobody is cheering. When John cracks coconuts, everyone is cheering for him. I'm like, I need this on a t-shirt. I'm going to start saying this in real life. Like, how come I don't get any cheers for doing this simple task, but these other people are?
That's called a cognitive distortion, baby. Like, I heard him say this and I was like, dude, you are way over assigning, like, you're assigning way too much importance to this task. Like, they weren't cheering for John because of his coconut. They were cheering for John because he was like building a relationship with them. He was like joking with them. Like, when he was cracking the coconut, like you can hear them talking before he cracks the coconut. And then Andy is just like sitting silently in the background, like drinking out of his coconut. And it's like, bestie, no one's even going to notice you're cracking a coconut if you're not even talking to them. Like, yeah.
I think it was so funny that this was brought up multiple times throughout the episode. And like, it first comes up pre-immunity challenge. And I think I'm just like, okay, this is bad because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're already putting out into the universe, like everyone hates me, I'm the odd person out, I'm not making these connections like everyone else, even losing that first challenge, I feel like it's more likely that it's just going to continue. You're going to isolate yourself because you feel like everyone doesn't like you. And then that's going to end up with you getting voted out. But I can also see like, okay, I think it is really awkward. Like if you can sort of tell people are talking about you negatively and they don't really like you, you don't really mesh well, it is going to be hard to insert yourself into those conversations. So it'd be interesting to see, like, is this in Andy's head or were people actually talking about him? Was he not really in the loop? Were him and John like on the outs of things and people were bad mouthing them? Because like, yeah, if you're going to say it before immunity challenge, self-fulfilling prophecy, but I can see like if people are really smack talking you already, it's going to be hard to integrate yourself because you're already nervous about wanting to talk to these people.
I sincerely doubt that they were like openly smack talking him, just because that would be such a spectacularly bad social move by,
Pre-immunity, yeah.
yeah, for every other person on this tribe. So like, again, I feel like it was all in his head, where like all of this stuff where like his like childhood of not having a lot of friends and then being in this new social situation. And like, again, with the whole thing with the coconuts, I'm like, dude, you are assigning way too much meaning to this. Like, does he just see like two other people talking and laughing and then assume like, oh, they're laughing at me, when it's like there's hundreds of other things they could be laughing at him about? So
Yeah, I feel like Andy seems like an awkward kind of person. I feel like that's probably like magnified 100 times being on a show like this where you're going to be paranoid, and now the paranoia is like extrapolated way out there. I feel like you see some of that like weird, awkward, and like the him and John conversation. The scene was so short where he's just like, I'm bi. And then John's like, oh yeah, I'm gay. And then that's the whole scene.
yeah, I was like, maybe they were trying to like build a relationship between the two of them, but I felt awkward watching that scene. So
Yeah, because usually it's like, oh, it's like a coming out scene. You have like the nice music in the background, and they talk about how, being bi or gay has affected their life and how they've navigated life. And like, the scene was just like, it was so weird. It was so awkward.
yeah, it was very strange, very awkward. I felt bad for John in this moment, because everyone else was like, oh, Andy kind of took John away. And then that's when they were kind of like talking about being a foursome. I'm like, it doesn't seem fair to John that just because Andy pulled him away, like he's no longer allowed in the group. Come on.
Yeah, like it'll be interesting to see if Andy makes it further. Like, does he chill out sort of like an Emily? Like, you have a rough time the first time, but you're able to find your footing later. Like, is he able to connect with people? Maybe he just can't connect with the people on this tribe, but if he made it to a tribe swap or merge, maybe he could connect with other people. Like, it'll be really interesting to see. Like, is it just sort of bad luck of the people that you started the tribe with? Maybe you could say it's bad luck for John, the people he started the tribe with. Or is it really like Andy can't really form these connections with people? Apparently, Andy's a patron of Rob Has a Podcast and recognized Asia as well. So it's like he is a fan of the show. So it'll be interesting to see, like, is he just going through a rough time right now, but he's able to like course correct later?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very curious about that as well. Just because from the preview for next week, doesn't look like there's a lot of course correcting happening. And I think also, again, Andy's like big meltdown happening in front of the other two tribes probably isn't going to help him like connect with people on other tribes. But, I would be interested to see things proven wrong.
Maybe it's a new strategy. It's like the new Matt Sing, where you make your threat level like so big because you're so wacko that people just want to keep you around. Because basically, like here, Andy versus John, Andy, even though he's a wild card, like no one's going to listen to him. So you keep him around. Similar to like Q saying at tribal council, vote me out, I want to quit. It's like you do something so wacko that people are like, huh, maybe their threat level is like so big. Let's keep them around because no one's ever going to listen to them or want to work with them. Let's let them go further, compared to John, who's very smart.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think it's interesting, though, like the idea of tribe strength, how that ended up playing into the conversation. But
Yeah. Is Andy really stronger than John? I feel like John could be good at puzzles. We didn't see him on a puzzle this time, but I'm like, he seems very analytical. He could be good at puzzles compared to Andy seemingly giving up in the challenge. I was like, are they really like that dispersed in strength?
yeah, it also is like they kind of mentioned this, but part of tribe strength is tribe cohesion. Like they literally said after they won the first reward challenge, like the reason we won this challenge is because of good communication between all of us. And I feel like that could definitely be foreshadowing for the fact that like keeping Andy is the wrong choice, because he isn't communicating with his tribe. He's kind of just deciding how they feel about him and then acting based on those feelings rather than what might be real.
Yeah, but I feel like voting out John, is technically smart because it's like John is going to play the game. John is trying to work with people. He's trying to work with Andy and flip votes. Maybe that you could say is John's downfall here. He's too nice. Like, if you're John, Andy just threw you under the bus in front of 18 people. You just got to throw him under the bus. Tell everyone you're willing to vote John's name down. Don't try, or Andy's name down. Don't try to work with Andy. And then Andy says Annika's name, but then John is the one to tell Sam about the Annika vote. Then it just looks like you're playing too hard. Maybe John should have just let Andy spiral more, make everyone dislike Andy, make him do like a lot more wacko things on the team. And then you'd have to vote Andy out because he's causing so much disruption. Or maybe Andy would have just quit or something. Like, John, too smart. He was trying to help Andy out. You should have just let Andy do his own thing.
Well, I thought it was weird because I thought that was part of the plan, because they had that whole scene where they're like, you know, John, we're going to tell them that it's you. And so John is still supposed to be like on Andy's side. But it's not like John can be like, oh, Andy, you should vote for me. So, of course, John has to pretend and play along with whatever plan Andy pitches him. Like, he can't be like, oh, no, we're not going to, like, if John is still pretending to be on Andy's side for the sake of the tribe, which it seems like they asked him to do, unless I'm misinterpreting that scene, then, like, they should all know that he's just, like, talking a bluff to keep Andy comfortable.
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit confusing. I feel like John, just at the current moment, because of Andy having the meltdown, it's like John's a logical choice because he's more rational. Andy, if he's able to chill a little bit, maybe you can influence him. But if Andy does continue down the path of like having the outbursts at where everyone can hear, sort of like Banu, it's like you can't really control someone like that. You want someone that you can control and like is more of a follower. But if they aren't that kind of person, then you'd want to vote them out. Maybe John also saying that he was a speechwriter and then has a successful podcast. That could be marks against him. He didn't say he worked with Obama or Clinton to the other people, though, but people just assumed that his podcast was big or they heard of his podcast. So you might be like, oh, John's successful. He's more rich than us probably because we're all regular people. He doesn't need the money. Let's vote him out.
Yeah, that scene was so interesting because I was like, I have never listened to Pod Save America, but like I know that it exists. Like if John were to be like, oh, have you heard of my podcast, Pod Save America? I'd be like, oh yeah, I've heard of that podcast. So like I'm genuinely shocked that none of them had heard of it.
Yeah, and it's like people aren't thinking though. If I met John, I'd be like, yo, John, let's work together. Because then maybe you could get a job out of it, or you can meet Obama out of it. Or it's like being friends with Mike White. You could get on White Lotus. You want the famous people around because maybe you can become friends with them.
Dude, I should have thought of that. I need to become friends with John so that I can meet Obama.
So. Yeah, these people aren't thinking. John, you can't invite any of the Yellow Tribe onto your podcast.
John, if you're watching this, please comment because I would love to be on your podcast.
And I think for Rachel, John getting voted out here could be good for her. If Andy genuinely like wants to work with her and feels safe with her, that could be good because if it's like a Sam Sierra versus Rachel Annika, Andy becomes a swing vote technically if it is like a 2v2, or if Andy keeps melting down, it could be a 4v1 next time. It's like Rachel, Annika, if they are a duo, could be in a good move if Andy likes them more. I just hope Andy has more meltdowns and then Yellow keeps on losing for voting John out.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not sure if Andy is gonna like Rachel more because she was the one who kind of like led to this spiral where like he obviously like pulled her aside when he was having a hard time sleeping because he like wanted something out of her. And then
it'll be interesting to see next week, like who is the person that calmed Andy down before Tribal, because he didn't have any outbursts at Tribal. So someone must be telling him like, yo, you are good. We are voting John out. Trust us, believe us. I think whoever that person is, Andy will want to work with because they've shown like, okay, they're trustworthy. They like me. And like whoever was able to calm his mind down there probably gets an ally out of this.
I kind of assumed that John was the one to calm him down, but that could be.
Oh, but how would that work though if Andy knows he's writing John's name down?
Good question. Does John know that Andy's writing John's name down?
I would think no, because John wrote Annika's name down, unless John was hoping Andy was also voting Annika.
I feel like every time we say this, but I'm really interested to see the beginning of the episode, next episode, because I feel like that always clears things up. It always clears up the questions that we have about.
Yeah, I think a fun premiere episode besides all of the running around in the woods. I think we had some good moments with everyone's cheering for them cracking coconuts and not me, and all of the melting down that was happening. Although sometimes in the moment watching it, it's like, what the heck are these people thinking? When John got voted out, I was like, really? What are you all thinking? But like, technically, it's probably smarter to vote John out.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like depending on how many times they lose, it could have been smarter to keep John. But
yeah, actually,
I guess we'll never know.
We want Andy to wreak havoc. So I just want to see more of that.
Yeah. But I feel like this was a really solid premiere, not because it was particularly interesting, but because it gave us a good idea of some pretty interesting characters. Like, I feel like one of the things we talk a lot about with Survivor is that the thing that makes it interesting isn't all of the like twists, it's the people. And I feel like there's some doozies on this season. There's some really interesting people.
Yeah, so I'm excited for next week. It is also so exciting that we are here back talking about Survivor. Always feels good to be back. It's a fun time. I enjoy recapping these with Alyssa each week. So yeah, let us know in the comments down below what you thought of this premiere episode of season 47. Did you like watching everyone do their scavenger hunts or not? What did you think of Andy this episode? Are you sad or happy that John got voted out? Let us know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you all next week.